Hello, my name is Rebecca Umbach, and I'm here today presenting work conducted by myself, Professor Nicola Henry, Gemma Beard, and Dr. Colleen Berryessa. This work focuses on non-consensual synthetic intimate imagery, which is also colloquially known as deepfake pornography. Please do be aware that this presentation will contain references to image-based sexual abuse. First, I'm going to just provide a brief background. In this space, definitions are really important because the language around the abuse type has changed and evolved over the years to be more victim-forward and descriptive of the harms. Today, we're going to be talking about non-consensual synthetic intimate imagery, which refers to actions involving digitally altered or manipulated nude or sexual photos or videos. You have probably heard this referred to as deepfake pornography. However, this references both the original Reddit user who began posting this type of abusive content years ago, and the term pornography, which ignores the abusive and non-consensual nature of the content. We consider perpetration with these types of fake images to be a subset of image-based sexual abuse, which itself is sometimes referred to as non-consensual intimate imagery or revenge porn. To date, there is actually no existing research on the prevalence of NSII victimization or perpetration, although there has been some research around attitudes towards deepfakes more broadly. In a few studies, findings have indicated concern about the harmful potential of AI-generated content, as well as respondents who report unfounded confidence in their ability to identify when content has been AI-generated. In contrast, the media coverage has been fairly extensive and often focused on the victimization of children, as in AI-generated child sexual abuse material, or female celebrities who are a common target of this problem. Finally, and this is a rapidly evolving list, I admit, there is a wide spectrum of legislative redress across countries, but no real evidence of a deterrent effect of such laws, nor many examples of actual prosecutions. We'll dive into the methodology and our research questions. We set out to answer some foundational questions that can hopefully provide a baseline for future research on prevalence. We wanted to see what the general public knew and thought about AI-generated image-based sexual abuse. We wanted to understand the prevalence of AI IBSA behaviors, especially perpetration, victimization, and consumption. And finally, given the role that gender often plays in IBSA attitudes and harms, we wanted to see whether these answers were influenced when factoring in respondent gender. We set about doing this via a survey that we deployed through an international panel company to just over 16,000 respondents in all, spread equally across 10 different countries. In this survey, most of the questions were on more traditional image-based sexual abuse, but because we were deploying in the spring last year, there was already a bit of noise about various new AI tools. So almost as an afterthought, actually, we asked about attitudes and behaviors related to deepfake pornography, acknowledging that it's not our preferred term, but is the most common term used colloquially and in media, and one which the respondents would recognize. So the countries that we looked at were Australia, Belgium, Denmark, France, Mexico, the Netherlands, Poland, South Korea, Spain, and the United States. We chose these countries based on sort of an interest in geographical diversity, as well as a wide spectrum of laws regarding image-based sexual abuse and regarding specifically synthetic AI-generated image-based sexual abuse. Our survey was primarily composed of closed-ended questions with one open-ended optional question at the end. We asked about familiarity, criminalization attitudes towards different types of behaviors, consumption behaviors, and victimization and perpetration experiences. We deployed our survey through YouGov with goals of representativeness by country and gender, and applied weights to our analyses as needed. To jump right into the results, we found low familiarity with the concept of deepfake pornography, with almost 3/4 of respondents indicating that they'd only ever heard the term or they hadn't heard it at all. Only 5.7% of respondents reported being quite familiar with deepfake pornography. So there's a bit of a disconnect between the amount of coverage that it's receiving in the press, particularly in like tech-related press or Western press, and the amount of awareness that's happening in the general public. Respondents were then asked whether a series of behaviors should be a crime using a 5-point Likert scale with a midpoint of 0. So 2 was definitely should be a crime, and -2 was definitely should not be a crime. We asked about behaviors involving, real material as well as behaviors related to deepfake pornography. While, while respondents were most punitive towards the real behaviors, the average respondent believed the sharing of and paying someone to create deepfake pornography should be a crime. So they did really focus in on that distribution aspect, as well as sort of how much effort did one go to actually create the content. And I'll flag that we asked this both for sort of celebrity victim survivors and for an ordinary person. And celebrity status didn't impact how people answered. So they believed that sort of celebrities should be just as protected as ordinary folks. The reported victimization prevalence was unsurprisingly low and the least common in the European countries that we surveyed. Weighted by population size, just 2.2% of respondents reported victimization. We note that this is probably a floor figure. Victims may not even be aware of their victimization if the perpetrator does not distribute the content or does so without the victim knowing. Perpetration reports were even lower, which is probably a combination of actual less perpetration as well as some social desirability bias in responding. So just about 1.8% of respondents indicated active perpetration. We also did ask about various consumption behaviors, and we saw that 6.2% of respondents reported viewing celebrity deepfake pornography. And of course, that is readily available online. So it's a low lift effort kind of behavior and less likely to be perceived as very antisocial. So we're probably getting more accurate reporting there. And finally, thinking about how gender may impact these answers. Image-based sexual abuse generally is often conceptualized as tech-facilitated gender-based violence. We found that when it came to the criminalization of behaviors across all behaviors, so real and AI generated, women were much more punitive as compared to men. On the other hand, men were reporting higher awareness of deepfake pornography, and they were also more likely to have engaged in consumption behaviors and to have perpetrated themselves. Finally, and this was not necessarily what we expected to see, they were also more likely to report being victims of creation or threats to share, but not actual sharing. That may indicate some other behaviors that are entangled with the creation and threats to share of deepfake content. Qualitative findings were derived from an optional open end that asked respondents whether they had anything to add. Only around 8% of respondents chose to fill out this open end, and these open ends were then coded sort of recursively. 4 main themes emerged, with the least common theme being victim blaming. So first step, condemnation, was the most common sort of theme in the qualitative responses. And you can see that one woman from Australia really highlighted the potential harms that could come from being victimized. I think it's dangerous as it could lead to serious injury, mental and emotional, etc., to the innocent person on the receiving end of the deepfake. The second common theme that emerged was sort of fear of technology. Some respondents surfaced fears about how deepfake technology has the potential to allow the victimization of anyone. This Danish woman said, "Deepfakes are widely scary because it's hard not to think if you have become a victim yourself without knowing it." Around a quarter of victims expressed opinions about criminalization and the need for regulations and legislation that could provide options for punishment of perpetration. So this South Korean man said, "Deepfakes are not yet controversial, but it can cause many social problems. In reality, legal regulations are needed to strongly punish these sex crimes." So he conceptualized of deepfake victimization as a sex crime, drawing more of a parallel to more in-person experiences. Finally, a rare sentiment expressed was victim blaming, which may indicate a lack of understanding about how these AI tools can be deployed or how beneficial it can be and necessary in some places to have an online presence. These attitudes are more commonly seen in studies of more traditional image-based sexual abuse, And so it's interesting to see them come up even for this AI-generated content. This Polish man said, "You should just not share any photos on the web at all. And if you make it available, you should take into account the consequences and then regret pretending to be a fool, and even worse, to blame anyone." So to go over our research questions again, we wanted to understand the awareness and attitudes towards AI-generated IBSA. We wanted to understand what the current prevalence of AI IBSA behaviors, including creating, viewing, and sharing images. We wanted to understand how gender could influence the answers to research question 1 and 2. In summary, despite significant media coverage, we found relatively low awareness paired with high perceived harm. We found a small percentage of respondents indicating either victimization or perpetration, although we do note that one of the concerns surfaced even by respondents is the potential for respondents to be victimized without their knowledge. The most passive behavior, just the viewing of available NSII, was reported by just over 6% of respondents. Finally, we found gender differences in both attitudes and behaviors, with women being more punitive and less likely to engage in perpetration behaviors, and men, perhaps surprisingly, being more likely to report victimization of creation and being threatened with the dissemination of images. We speculate that this latter finding may relate to sextortion behaviors, although obviously more research is needed to probe that hypothesis. These findings did lead us to a few design recommendations that really span the ecosystem. At a societal level, we highlight that legislation, such as the Federal Defiance Act introduced in Congress earlier this year, may help provide some level of deterrence if paired with actual prosecutions. At the very least, it could help convey the norms and values that we want to live by as a society. We also think more educational programming about the harms and consequences of non-consensual synthetic intimate imagery may dissuade potential perpetrators. We consider interventions at the technology level as well. Perhaps before individuals are allowed to create content, platforms could ask users to commit to using the tools only for pro-social purposes. During the process of creation, tools could use classifiers such as those used by Google Safe Search to detect nudity in created content, which could trigger a warning. Images could also be watermarked to indicate the artificial provenance of the image. And on the victim survivor side, users could be empowered through discovery tools deployed responsibly, which could help them find intimate content that may have been created. Finally, relevant and trusted resources about recourse and options available to the victim survivor should be made readily available. Thank you for listening, and please contact me if you have any questions. Thank you.